All right. Next, just 1 second. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. We've got lots of guests here right now that are eager for the conversation to begin. And so again, for those who have recently joined us in the last few minutes, I'm Kevin Singer. I'm co-founder and director of Neighborly Faith. Our organization began in 2015 when my colleague Chris Stackerick and I were studying theology together at Wheaton College in Wheaton, Illinois. And our mission, as I just mentioned, is to help evangelical Christians or Christian conservatives to be good neighbors to people of other faiths. If you want to learn more about Neighborly Faith, you can visit our website at neighborlyfaith.org, or you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. This is the kickoff dialogue for a series that we'll be hosting in April and May, which gives evangelical leaders like Bob, as well as leaders of other faiths like David and Mohamed, an opportunity to share their unique perspectives on various topics and to model honest and respectful dialogue. Our next dialogue will actually be on Wednesday, April 8th, so this coming Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, and will feature Omar Suleiman of the Yakin Institute and Scott Sauls, who is the senior pastor of Christ Presbyterian Church in Nashville, Tennessee, which is going to be absolutely fabulous. You won't want to miss it. We'll be announcing the registration for that dialogue as soon as this dialogue is over. So if you head over to Neighborly Faith on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, you'll see a link tonight to register for that dialogue on Wednesday of next week. But before we officially begin, I actually want to quickly poll the Christians that we have here in the audience. Again, this is just for the Christians who are in our Zoom audience tonight. So if you are Muslim or Jewish, I would ask that you don't participate, just the Christians who are here. Go ahead and fill out that poll. But in the meantime, I'm going to have our guests introduce themselves. And Bob, I thought if we could start with you, that would be great. Tell us who you are, what you do, and how you know the other panelists here tonight.
My name is Bob Roberts. I'm a failed Baptist pastor because I've tried to baptize Magid and David for years, and I have been very unsuccessful. Not given up yet, but somebody help me. But I'm the global senior pastor of Northwood Church that I started 34 years ago. And me and David and Magid started an organization called Multi-Faith Neighbors Network. And I got to know Magid in Nepal with a bunch of extremist and non-extremist imams and pastors. That's a long story. I got to know David through Christian-Jewish dialogue that he and I were a part of. And then when he became the ambassador for religious freedom, connected him with a lot of global pastors. And I love these men very much and have traveled the world with them, continue to, and they mean a lot to me.
That's great. Imam Magid, would you care to go next?
Sure. My name is Mohamed Magid. I'm the Imam of Adam Center, All Dallas Area Muslim Society, a mosque in Virginia, one of the largest mosques in the United States. And also member of founder of Multi-Faith Neighborhood with the Bob and David. And I get to know Bob, as he just mentioned, through the our meeting in Nepal, and then we started the journey together that tried to bring imams and pastors first to get to know one another. And now we have rabbis join us in those meetings. And Ambassador David, I get to know him way before he became ambassador. David is a champion of religious freedom, and he was among the first to defend Muslim community at the time the Muslim community was attacked, and we created together something called Shoulder to Shoulder, organization defending Muslim rights. I traveled with both of them the world, and Bob have been traveled with him almost all the states in the United States, and I have great respect and admiration for their work.
All right, go ahead, Rabbi David.
Well, first, Kevin, indulge me just to say how much I appreciate the work you're doing, and
Thank you.
how much I know for all of us, our prayers for everyone who's watching is safe and healthy and secure and supportive of each other. And we'll talk more about that. And I should point out that if you think about Sunni Muslims that Imam Magid represents, in the Jewish community, normative Judaism, and evangelicalism, they actually have a lot in common in the sense that their authority is congregationalist based. They don't have hierarchies here coming down with authoritative statements. We don't believe they have to be intermediaries between the individual and God. We share a lot in common. So the fact that you're looking for greater understanding gives a really strong basis for us to build on. And the three of us have shared that understanding of each other, deepen our understanding of our respective faiths. And I hope in the work that we've done traveling the world together, are modeling the kind of world of respect and tolerance and freedom for all people who practice their religion peacefully, to share common concerns and address common concerns.
Thank you so much for saying that. Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons I asked you three to come on is because, I mean, you have really demonstrated how people with very different perspectives can actually build something more than just tolerance for each other, which I think is a really low bar in our society. I'm not sure it actually lends itself to constructive cooperation in any way, to say, how do we make our common life better in our society, just to say, I tolerate you. And I think what inspires me about your friendship is you found a way to not betray what makes you who you are in entering into these friendships. In fact, you've sort of asked, what is the best in each of us, and how can we both allow the best of who we each are and who our traditions are to shine in our friendship. And I think that's something we don't really see enough in interreligious dialogue. Is I think a lot of times there's, how are we the same? How are we common? How is everything we believe this actually the same? And I know for me, and with speaking with neighborly faith, is that's not really what we're going for. We're really wondering, how is our differences what make our friendships worthwhile? And so I think y'all have really modeled that, and I think that's what makes this so exciting. But without further ado, I want to tell our audience a little bit about how they can be participating tonight. Obviously, we have our messages live, but another thing to be thinking about during our dialogue, of course, is what questions you might want to ask the guests. And so you'll see at the bottom of your screen a chat box. You'll see people who are here writing messages. I'm already seeing a message from Dave Robinson. Good evening, Bob, Muhammad, and David. Someone just told David, thank you for dressing up for this dialogue. And so please be messaging. I think this is a common space, a public space. I know each of these leaders are really passionate about talking to the public about their beliefs and about their friendship, and they have nothing to hide. So something else is be thinking about what questions you want to ask, and you'll see there's a little Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Please be thinking about the questions. In fact, I think you may be able to actually begin writing those questions out, and when the Q&A time begins, we'll be ready for them. So are you three ready to begin the dialogue portion of this evening?
Sure.
Let's do it.
Very convincing, Muhammad. Very, very convincing. Let's start with this. I think this is a question for all of you. How have your communities, whether your church, Bob, your mosque, Muhammad, or your synagogue, David, how have they been responding to the current moment? What are you seeing? What are you sensing? I know that's pretty open-ended, but I want to give you a chance to talk about the people that you serve and the people you lead and the people you love. And so whoever wants to start, go ahead and jump in.
Why don't you start with chronological order? Judaism before Christianity and Islam.
Okay,
David, you start. I think you were elected. Yeah.
First, the new technologies that have allowed us to create new forms of community has just exploded in such incredibly creative ways. And I don't know if it's true in your faith communities, but if you ask a number of rabbis, they'll tell you they're getting larger turnout in the online services that they're doing than they normally do on a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday in our houses of worship. And I think it's a common, and see them nodding, I think it's a common phenomenon. Secondly, we know that people are frightened. They are hurting. They are often grieving, and trying to be the source of solace and support for people at a time that they are fearful, at a time that they feel helpless, at a time they need community, has been a central theme of all of our work. And we've learned from each other. We share best practices across religious lines, and we lift and adapt prayers that one has to another faith group. These are times where people, when they are frightened, when they are needing, when they are grieving, when they're feeling small in the night, they turn to their houses of worship. And we found new forms to be there. In that sense, I think it will be a richer religious community at the end of this, with new forms of building community. But I only grieve that it caused such pain to bring such changes about.
David, can I ask you in just a couple of sentences as best you can, people may have absolutely no idea what makes your particular strand of Judaism distinctive, because I know you work with Reform Jews. As briefly as you can, like how do you describe in an elevator pitch, like how Reform Jews are different from other strands of Judaism?
The three major strands of Jewish life are what we call the Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox communities, and then within each there are breakdowns and some smaller groupings outside. We often call them streams more than denominations. There are basically two kinds of Jews: those who believe that the Bible and the Jewish law embodied in at least the first half of the Talmud, or the entirety of the Talmud, the great compilation of Jewish law and law at the time, beginning at the time that Jesus of Nazareth walked, that is literally the Word of God, and it contains 613 commandments that we have to live with for eternity. And there are those who believe that the encounter at Sinai, which was an extraordinary event, however you understand it, in which an entire people believed they had encountered the divine, transformed the Jewish people. And our sacred texts are the efforts of men and women to try and understand what God has called us to do. And that task of men and women writing those sacred texts has continued out the centuries until today. And therefore, the individual laws that may have been written in the original Bible or the original Talmud are not binding on us today. We use those that are existentially meaningful to us as individuals in a community, but we're constantly adapting and creating them. We, the Reformed Jewish movement, which uniquely in North America is the largest stream of Judaism. Elsewhere, it's the Orthodox community that believes in the literal Word of God at Sinai. We fall into that other category that believe we're part of a chain of tradition of men and women striving to understand what God has called us to do throughout the millennium, the 3 millennium of Jewish life. And we're proud to be as strong a link in this chain, in that chain of tradition, in this generation, as we continue to create Jewish life moving forward.
Thank you very much. Moving on to Mohamed, actually, if you could tell us a little bit about how your community is responding to the current moment. You still there, Mohamed?
Yes, I thought they're going to go chronological order.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, but it's okay. I would like to say that it is not easy for me as an imam that who, officiate marriages and preside over funeral and lead Friday prayer every Friday. I'm in the mosque, unless I'm traveling with David and Bob. To have now for 5 weeks almost not to be in the mosque, it's not easy. And I know it's not easy for my community. It's not easy not to have the gathering of people and having them to have that moment of half an hour, 40 minutes of spiritual connection. But we know that we're doing it for the right reason. It was very difficult to make that decision 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago. And we have to tell the community we're doing this for the safety and protection of life, because in Islam, that protection of life take priority of everything, actually. The same verse in the Old Testament, the same verse in the Holy Quran, whoever saved one life, as if you have saved life of all humanity. That being said, I think the community now become virtual community. I just finished a class before this class, and Wednesday night, I teach a class at 9 o'clock. Bob knows that. And I teach Friday class and Monday class. And it's true that what David was saying, that I have more people now in my class virtually than the people in the mosque. But the community also been very giving. They taking care of the elderly in our community. They checking on people. They delivering grocery to people home. It's just at the difficult time, you see the best of humanity, and also that we have people from other faiths reaching out to me. You have, local pastors and rabbi and so forth connecting with us. But it is our community, I think, getting used to now to the virtual services. I do all my counseling online. I use Zoom, like we're using it now. And of course, we suspending all marriages. We cannot officiate marriages now. And in Islam, we cannot do this through Zoom and this kind of things. They have to wait until go back to normal. And we are doing training for religious leaders, imams in our community, how to handle these issues. And we're praying to God Almighty, this will be over with less pain and loss of life. But we have Ramadan coming, this will be another loss for community to get together. We'll see what will happen.
Okay, Bob, how's the community responding?
Incredible. All the things that you're hearing, the frightening things about this, it's all real. But I've got to say, and I agree with what Magid said, this is a moment where you're seeing people stand up and really reach out. About 150 years ago, the pastor was the most important person in the community. And it's not been that way for 150 years. It changed over time. But it very well could be that in this crisis, pastors, imams, priests, rabbis may become some of the most important people in the whole community. And here's why I say that. It's not just a matter of giving hope. It's a matter of service. I mean, we're doing meals like Magid. We're taking care of the elderly. This morning, I was on a Skype call with several world leaders. And they were talking about how these big foundations and humanitarian organizations, they can't go in, they can't work, and they're trying to figure out how do they move forward. Guess what? No one is waiting. I don't know pastors, imams, or rabbis that are waiting for someone to tell them, go do something. It's happening, and I'm excited about that. I think we're living at a moment in history that we're not going to forget. I think we are forever reformatting how we communicate, how we relate to one another. And so I look at it as this incredible opportunity to do something different. Here's what else I would say. If you look at our country, we are so polarized. Our church is a multi-ethnic church. So I have Democrats, I have Republicans, I've got everything. This has the potential of saying, look, we're all in this together. This has the potential, I'm sorry to say, but the good part about this is the potential for us to come together and say, hey, we've got to do something about this. David and Magid, there's something that we teach when we take pastors and imams and rabbis on retreats. We talk about how it really doesn't start with the head, but it starts with the hand. We sweat together. It captures the heart. Then we can have those head conversations. And I think it's a moment. I think a lot of us are moving beyond questions like, what does it mean to be the church? I have one of my spiritual sons, Nick Burleson. It's a big church. And he was on the phone call with a lot of mega church pastors the other night. And they were all talking about, man, we've got to get back to having our services. If we don't, we're going to go broke. I mean, what are we going to do? There's a lot of panic. And Nick said, guys, we may lose our money, but we don't have to lose our influence. And I think there's a lot of people, there's a lot of pastors right now that are having to ask the question, what is this about? I mean, is it just about going back to church as normal? Those pastors that are waiting to get back to what was, I feel sorry for them. It's gone. And even if everything goes back to the way it was, this internet's changed everything. We've discovered we can do a whole lot of stuff. I mean, let me tell you why the numbers are up on churches. Because now people are listening to 5 or 6 different pastors. And don't forget this, when you look at these numbers, they're just zooming in and zooming out. I mean, it doesn't mean all those people are listening to you for the whole time. So the question is, what is the value that faith brings to people's lives? And I think pastors and rabbis and priests and imams, man, we've got an opportunity to make a difference right now. And they want us, but not because of our faith. They want us because they need help, whether it's groceries or being taken to the hospital or kids with lunches. And this is what it's all about. And, you know, I'm so passionate about my faith. But working with people of other faiths to serve humanity, what's wrong with that? Where's the sin in that? I mean, if we Christians look at Paul and we look at Jesus, the exclusivity has to move beyond. So I look at this, not so much am I compromising my faith, but what is the strength of my faith that says, hey, I don't care if you're the same religion as I am, whatever orientation you've got sexually, I don't care what race you are. It doesn't matter. I may disagree with you, but for God's sakes, I've got to live in community with you. This is a moment that we could seize. And I'm praying God uses it to really pull us together.
That's a great segue, actually, to talk about how y'all have been leaning on each other in other faith communities. I'm hoping you could present or share some specific instances where you feel like your friendship has grown during this season, or maybe an opportunity you've had to deepen the friendships that you have this season, or the opportunities that you've taken to deepen friendships between your faith communities during this season. Does that question make sense? So both personally together, but also your communities. What are you seeing? How are you seeing those relationships deepen right now?
Well, let me jump in. First of all, I just want to just kind of give a bottom line to everything that we've said so far. We know that there are people who are going to be frightened by those who are different, distrustful of those who look or act or talk differently than they do. I think we made a leap of faith early on that we would live by the most commonly repeated commandment in the entire Bible, in the entire Old Testament, Hebrew scriptures, to love your neighbor as yourself. And that is the vision that we are living day in and day out in the way we interact with each other as friends, but also in the work publicly that we're trying to model at a time that I think the world desperately needs that. Let me just offer a slightly different way of thinking, Kevin, about this moment. You're asking about this season. I think actually there's a bit less of interfaith interaction this particular season because all of us are scrambling. All of us are focused on how we actually work within our own faith community to adapt to this new world. What will Passover be like this year? And how will we do it and make it work in all these different formats? What will Ramadan be like? What will the iftar be like when you can't gather for a meal? What will Easter be like here? And we're doing a lot of work in our own community, and yet at the same time, as I said, we're learning from each other. We're sharing best practices here. And there's a lot of cooperative endeavors at the local level where we have to find mechanisms to support those. What are we doing about the homeless? And we work together in interfaith coalitions. What do we do about the hungry in our community? We work together in the interfaith coalitions. So that's happening simultaneously. But I think at the same time, there is a focus within our own communities about how to make these holidays as rich and meaningful with all of these new formats, all of these new customs and ceremonies that we're creating on the fly to capture the tradition in new ways for us. So you do have a paradoxical aspect going on of a focus within our own communities, even while much of our interfaith, particularly social service work, continues.
I would say one of the things it's doing is, the good thing is there's a lot of us that have been building friendships before this crisis came along. And that prepares us to be able to execute and engage and do things. And Multi-Faith Neighbors Network, you can follow me on Twitter at Bob Roberts Jr. or Instagram. And like, we're having a meeting of pastors, imams, and rabbis. We just got it set up for Monday at 3 o'clock Eastern time. And if you're a pastor, imam, rabbi, you want to get to know pastors, imams, and rabbis in your city, to work together, to serve together, it's important. And you know, right now, the tension, Kevin, your work is very important because the tensions have not gone away. I listened to Governor Cuomo say, listen, we're in this crisis right now. Anti-Semitism has not stopped. It hasn't taken a break. It's more important now that we work together than ever before. And so Monday, what we're going to talk about is, how do you connect with people of other faiths? It's going to be a meeting for clerics, and you can find out when and how, and hit the info button, and we'll get you a Zoom link or something, as long as you're a cleric and you're wanting to work together. So I think that's a big thing. But I think it also goes beyond that. Like right now, Asian Americans, I mean, they've really come under fire. It's not the Chinese virus. It's the coronavirus. And so as the tragedy is, though, people are targeted and hate is there. And a lot of people want to blame other people. So I've called some of the Muslims in my community and across the country, some of the Jews that I'm close to. How are you doing? Is everything going okay? I think we can't ignore those things, because a lot of times there's fear that a minority has, especially in a time of like what we're facing right now. Are they going to be blamed? Are people going to give them a hard time? And so that may not be on the list of how can we help people, but it's got to be first and foremost in our mind. I had to go to the Walmart the other day, and I saw an 80-year-old lady, and I said, ma'am, I'm your guy. Whatever you need, I'll help you. What do you need? And so she said, well, would you lift this and put it in my cart and do that? And I saw a lady with a hijab, and I just looked at her. I said, Salam alaikum. And she said, are you a Muslim? I said, no, but I love Muslims. And I said, if I can help you, ma'am, whatever you need in this store, I'll help you out. I'm a Christian. I'm friends with all these Muslims. And I think right now, we need to really reach across the aisle and communicate we're in this together. So I think for us, though, there's a lot of other crazy things that we're going to be doing. Like, for example, I want to start this class called No Christians Allowed. And I want to have Muslims and Jews, and I want to let them ask anything they want about Christianity, because I've done that before at mosques and synagogues. They're not going to ask crazy questions in a room of 150, 200 people. But, if it's one-on-one, wouldn't that be cool? And then I'm looking at our communion service. Like, I found out I'm going to get to go to somebody's Shabbat for Passover. I'm so excited about that. And it'll be virtual. Well, why can't I do that with Muslims and Jews and invite them into my home and experience communion and explain it every step of the way? So they may never believe like I believe, but they can at least understand it. And I'm hoping that Magid will have a virtual iftar at his home, and he will order in food from a local halal person that's brought to my home for free, and I can watch him do his event. So those are some of the things that
Kevin, to answer, also to elaborate on what David was saying and Bob, there's a community with the small c and the community with big C, capital C. Our community, the Muslim community, for example, would need their imams to take care of them at this time. Also, a rabbi needs to take care of his synagogue. A pastor needs to take care of his church, because people will identify themselves with those leaders, and they will ask for their help. They ask for their assistance. They want to comfort. They want to be comforted. They want their fear to be addressed. But also they want to be served. Therefore, we have to be able to, as David was saying, to bring all of these resources together. People worried also about fundraising for their community, as that pastor was saying to Bob. For that, there's a lot of concern with the community with a small c. But we live in the larger community as well. And that community, it is our neighbor, a Christian person, a Jewish person, a Hindu, a Buddhist. What can we do in our neighborhood to take care of those individuals? Because you may have an elderly person in our community, maybe his children are not there or her children are not there. We come to know that maybe have contracted this coronavirus. What can we do as a neighbor? Can we live up to the values of our faith, loving thy neighbor? Therefore, the aspect of taking care of our own, while we're taking care of everyone in our neighborhood, has to go together. But it's true that there's a lot of energy being spent internally. I agree with David on that. Now, there's a few things I want to say on this. I would like to see people take spiritual lessons from this crisis, like all of us together, whether Jewish or Christians or Muslims. What are the things we learn from this? One thing, the vulnerable people in our community. You know, washing hands is luxury. I know for sure at this moment, the Rohingya, they don't have clean water to wash their hands. Staying home is a luxury. There's some people don't have a home to go to, or they live 10 of them in the same house or the same apartment, actually, where there's no physical distance. If one of them gets sick, the rest just for sure they're going to get sick. It's a luxury. For we have to rethink even our theology. I'm talking about theology of service and the spirituality and so forth. If everyone believed that the mega mosque and mega church and mega synagogue, it is where they're going to be, it's just a false, notion of serving God. We have to make sure that our attitude changes. I don't think it will be the same community. The world will not be the same. Therefore, we have to prepare ourselves now how to cope with this. But what post-coronavirus? What will happen to those people who have lost their job? Yeah. Thousands of people, millions of people. What will happen to people who are going to lose their life in this process? Who's going to really take care of those widows or the people that been left with no help? That is a challenge for the faith community, I think. And as Bob was saying, there's an opportunity for us here to get together as one community, and we cannot allow religious bigotry to take place in our community, because I can see for some people sending me, even some religious leaders, using anti-Semitic, all kind of rhetoric to try to blame this coronavirus in maybe Muslim community or the Jewish community or this community or that community. That is not the teaching of God. Yeah. We have to get together and pull it together. That will be my take on this.
David, anything you want to add on the friendship level?
No, just to say that the three of us work together on this project, the Multi-Faith Neighbors Network, in which we take imams and evangelical pastors and rabbis into a retreat where they really get to know each other. They study together. They work on common projects in their communities. And that has, in the many communities we've done this, that really has resulted now in networks existing where people at the time of crisis like this are calling each other and working together and, again, learning from each other. Because the problems that we face as clergy in our congregations in trying to help those people that you've named so powerfully, Bob and Mohammed here, we all share that in common. And so we learn from each other and we work together wherever we can. And I think that is happening all across America now.
Yeah.
Kevin, can I throw something in real quick?
Please do.
One of the interesting things, we're living in a time of migration. All religions are all places. Everyone is everywhere. And in the past, we would relate like Christians are in the West, Muslims in the Middle East, Buddhists in the Far East. That's not our world anymore. And I think a lot of the reasons we have conflict with religion is a lot of us don't know how to relate with people of other faiths in the public square. It's not a bad thing for your faith. It's an incredible opportunity for your faith to make you deeply ask, what do I believe? Why do I believe it? How do I live my faith out? And the idea that one religion or one people is going to help everyone while no one else does is just crazy. Because the reality is, in the stories of the Bible, there were some kings that maybe didn't follow God in the Hebrew scriptures, and there were some other people of countries that would respond to God. They weren't Jews. And so the whole point is to live together. But could I also say this? I was on another call where they were talking about how this whole process may actually take 2 years by the time it goes through all the countries and circles. And see what you were saying, Magid. You can't have people that are homeless. You can't have refugees all over the world living like they do and ever stop this. So even migration issues down at the border. I mean, wouldn't it be crazy? Wouldn't it be crazy if this was the thing that caused those issues to be dealt with? It ought to be love and compassion. But sad, it may wind up being for our own survival. We've got to deal with those issues. And so I think the motivation in working together should be this: how can we make the world a better place? So, yeah, I'd like to baptize the whole world, but Jesus made it real clear, do your works before men, let your light shine so that they'll see your good works and praise your Father in heaven. And so he also said something about living at peace. And that's all throughout our scriptures. I've always found it odd that peace was not a good enough thing to develop among people of other faiths. If I can't convert you to my faith, then you're of total waste to me. I don't have time for you. Where is that in the New Testament? Where is that? What's happened to us that we view people as projects? I think it is a learning moment for Christians in America if we'll be quiet and listen to what the Spirit is saying.
I wish we could talk about this part of the conversation all night because I'm really into this, but I really want to talk at least briefly about how y'all are thinking you're going to do the holiday this year, whether it's Passover, Ramadan, or Easter. I'm going to ask that you guys go pretty quickly on this. Originally, I was going to have you guys talk a little about the meaning of each of these holidays. I don't know if we have time for that in this particular call, but I think we would like to know, practically speaking, how are you preparing your communities to celebrate the holy days this year, given the current situation? Bob, can we start with you?
Sure. We're going to do it in our home. So we'll do our Good Friday service. Communion will be in our home, and Pastor Scott will be bringing the main message, and the music will be with the band recorded at another time, and we'll be having Facebook parties, inviting people to come and join. And I'm hoping that Magid and David will be there, and we'll have a blast. So it's going to be online. It's going to be very different from what we're used to.
And Bob, in one sentence, what is Easter all about?
Oh man, in one sentence, it's about the hope Jesus gives to all humanity, because he just didn't die on the cross. We believe he rose from the dead. And that means every single one of us get to be risen.
All right. David, we'll slide over to you. How are you going to celebrate Passover this year? Obviously, the Seder element may not fly this year. What's the conversation in your community about this right now?
For those who are not familiar with it and haven't ever seen it, it is a home-based holiday. You just imagine a large table, and on the table there is a central plate that looks something like this here, and it has the bone of a lamb, reminding us of the sacrifice that was made at the temple in Jerusalem on this holiday. It has greens that remind us that this is the spring harvest time that it's connected with. The bitter herb reminding us of slavery in Egypt. and the wine and the charosis that is sweet, and the wine that we say the blessing over us, representing the hope of a better world. So all of these symbols, essential with sharing the meal and passing it around. We can't do that. And it's even hard for some of the people to make the special meals, dishes that are foods that are the customary at this time. So we're getting our Haggadah that we're using, that we read from to tell the story of the flight from slavery to freedom, and we're putting it online for the people who are going to be part of it, coming in on Zoom, sharing it together. Here, everyone's going to have to do the best to make their own version of the plate and the foods that are eaten, particularly the matzah, the unleavened bread, because there wasn't time to leaven the bread as they fled Egypt and the long journey that eventually took 40 years to get to the promised land. So we're helping everyone do the best they can in their homes, and we're thinking of creative, fun ways to share the stories and reflect on the meaning for our time. The story of the plagues in Egypt remind us very much of what's happening here. And the idea of going from slavery to freedom, and the hope that freedom in a better time is always there, is absolutely central to this holiday and central to what humanity needs as we share this crisis in common. So all of that is bound up here. You should do a show after these holidays to ask how did it work out here. But I know it'll be fun, and I know, knowing the kind of people who will be part of it, that it'll be people who have very interesting and meaningful insights to what this holiday should represent today.
Thank you so much, David. Mohamed, as concisely as you can, how is Ramadan going to go this year? If you could maybe in a sentence, just like Bob and David, talk about what is the meaning of Ramadan for those of our listeners who maybe have never heard of it or don't really know much about it. Talk to us.
Ramadan is the holiest month in the Islamic calendar. Muslim follow lunar calendar. And the month that come just 2 months before pilgrimage, and we fast in that month from dawn to sunset. We don't drink, we don't eat. There's exception for people who are sick and people cannot do it, but it's a month of reflection. And the month that we pray at night, long prayers every night, and we're doing that at Adam Center in the main center, and we have done it also in synagogue, because we rent a synagogue, and we break fast every day at sunset, where people sit together and eat a meal. In our mosque, we serve 600 people. They come together for breakfast every day, and that will not happen this year. Yeah, you are.
Maybe I should turn my microphone on. Zoom 101. So it sounds like lots of sort of negotiating. How are we going to make this holiday meaningful, but in ways that don't involve as close a contact? But I love how you're both still attuned to how important these holidays are for your community, and thinking through sort of innovative ways to continue to centralize these holidays for how important they are. I think now we've reached that time for a Q&A. I've seen a bunch of questions come through already. I'll start with a question that was asked by one of our Neighborly Faith Fellows. So we have college students evangelical college students across the country, who we provide coaching and resources to launch initiatives on their campuses. Let's see. I think this is an interesting question. How can Jews, Muslims, and Christians talk about Zionism together in a way that's meaningful, in a way that doesn't create division, but in a way that may actually generate greater understanding? What do you think about that?
Are you kidding? You think we can deal with that in the next 60 seconds? Here's how I deal with it as a Christian. Everybody's created in the image of God, and God loves us all the same. Now, David, don't be offended by this. Y'all were the chosen people in the Hebrew scriptures, but in Jesus, we believe we all got chosen. All right? And so what that means to me is God loves me as much as he loves you, David, and he loves Muhammad almost as much as he loves you, David, but not quite as much. So the scriptures are clear about that. No, he loves us all the same. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. So I try not to deal with the politics of that because it changes every single year. My primary concern is, how do we love one another as Americans, Israelis, Palestinians, Jews, Muslims, and Christians? I'm more concerned about the relational component than I am the political component. That would be my answer.
All right. Any other thoughts on that, or do you guys want to move on?
Very quickly. First of all, in terms of the chosen idea, the normative Jewish understanding, the traditional Jewish understanding is we're chosen by God to bring the message of ethical monotheism to the world. And we believe that Muslims and Christians fit into the category of those who believe in the one God, and that God has called us to righteousness, to create a world of justice and peace. And therefore, heaven is accessible to Christians and Muslims as it is to Jews. That's just our normative belief in terms of what that means. Zionism is a 3,000-year-old. The toughest political issues are those that pit valid moral principles in tension with each other. Zionism is simply the name for the national identity of Jews for 3,000 years in our historic homeland of Eretz Israel, of the land of Israel. That's one reality, and we are blessed to be in a generation that has seen the restoration of that historic homeland and of a Jewish state. Here, the other reality is that there is a Palestinian people that believes as deeply in their gut that they have a right to self-determination on the same land as the Jewish people do, and we have to find a way to share it. Here, we believe this two-state solution is the best way to do that, and that both national dreams can be fulfilled if the leaders of those countries work to make it happen and the people of those countries believe in it. And I think all of us are dedicated to trying to bring that about.
I think, if I might contribute to this, it's very important actually for people of faith and for me as an imam to look for the principles that governs relationship between human beings. Those principles are the following: equality before eyes of God. All human beings are equal in the eyes of God. Number two, all human life is important, whether it's Muslims or Jewish or Christians. Number three, justice for all. All people have to have access to dignified life, regardless of that person's color of skin, religious background, where they come from. And number four, that humanity have to share resources. Then any other definition of any, whether political movement or individuals, if people adhere to those principles, and all of us agree on that, then all of us in the same page.
All right. Well done handling a very difficult question. And yeah, I now realize, like, maybe I should have started with a softball. Instead, I went straight to the gut. We've got a couple of people asking me about, there's a lot of conversation about the local ramifications of what's going on. What about the global? I know all three of you have connections globally, take trips together globally. What distinctive opportunities do you think there are globally with the current situation? Obviously, there are challenges, but do you see distinctive opportunities globally, either at the current moment or when we start coming out of the current season?
I would say the biggest opportunity globally for us is to work in a multi-faith manner. And a friend of ours, a man named Mohammed El-Sanusi, is working right now with his organization to put together a technology platform, because you've got to understand, in America, we get to do this. It's not as easy to do exactly what we're doing as it is in other parts of the world. So they're setting that up because they're discovering in the rest of the world the key to dealing with everything from social distancing and how are you going to deal with people coming together for worship, because worship is a big deal around the world. For some, that is the central thing that takes place in community. And so to connect those clerics, to be able to communicate safe practices, to be able to have access to people who would volunteer to serve in those communities, it cannot be overstated.
I would just add that we're focused on the virus. It's not the only thing in the world. There are problems that are systemic structural problems here. So we have been particularly outspoken about religious freedom and against, as a global right, and against religious persecution, religious discrimination. And we stand together on behalf of oppressed peoples and the victims of ethnic cleansing and genocidal activity and religious persecution across the globe. That remains true. We stand against global poverty here, and each of us in our own way has powerful themes that make what happens to the least of us, what happens to the vulnerable, to the weak, to the elderly, to the children, the widow, and the orphan, the central test of the moral equality of any society and of international entities. Here, and the coronavirus, which has devastated the most developed areas, the ones that have the best medical systems. Imagine as it spreads to those areas of the world that don't have anything approaching what we have here in the United States, how devastating it's going to be. It will dramatically show the moral responsibility that we have to act to protect them in this virus, but then to finally come to grips with God wanting all peoples to be able to live with a modicum of opportunity and decency, to share God's wealth. The earth is the eternal's and the fullness thereof. We're told that we have to share God's wealth with all of God's children. That's going to be dramatically made clear to us with the impact of this virus. And I really hope we can take real steps to both protect God's creation, the earth, but also to share God's gifts and benefits and wealth with all of God's children everywhere.
I agree 100% with what David just was saying. It is very important, I do believe, that to advocate on the behalf of the most vulnerable people in the world today. And here I would like to talk about refugees. I do believe that this is a moment for us to reflect, of sharing our resources and addressing the issue of the need of people in our communities, but around the globe. I do believe that there's enough for everybody in the face of the earth, in terms of resources, but we have to have compassion. We have to really to make the effort of extending our hand genuinely to people around the world. And I do believe that there's a chance for people of faith to come together. Today, I was World Health Organization putting together faith community to address this issue, and they wanted to have it a sustainable relationship to address all other concerns regarding health in communities.
So very, very quickly, I think this is actually a great question. Now, obviously, this is a group that has good friendships, good relationships, but I think there's people here who are wondering, is this always sunshine and roses? Like, are there aspects of your friendship that are difficult? Are there aspects of your friendship that rub up against each other in ways that maybe you don't always anticipate, but the moments come, the conversations come that are harder. As quickly as you can, if you could each just describe like maybe a moment or a story or a situation where maybe you didn't see the conflict coming, but it came and you had to learn how to discuss the issue or deal with it together. Not everyone has to answer this question, but if something comes to mind about how these relationships can actually be difficult, please go ahead and answer that.
Bob, do you have anything that comes to mind as you hear that question?
Yeah, I would say, sometimes it's not theological, Kevin. Sometimes it's just relational. Magid is from Sudan. He's late sometimes. No, that's not true. He's late all the time. He got to a meeting with me and he was a minute early. That's late for me. He was so proud of himself. David teaches law at Georgetown. Do you know how intimidating it is to work with him? I work with him on projects. I love it because he's going to look at details. But David, sometimes those details run me crazy, but I know they've got to be done. They don't have any issues with me. I'm such a kind, gentle kind of a guy. But
we deal with as we travel with diverse groups of Muslims, Jews, and Christians in many locations around the world. And I think it's no secret, there are elements in these communities, that have never met someone from another faith group until we come and bring people together. It's their first time, and sometimes uncomfortable things are said. And you would hope that your partner would answer it the way you would want them to answer, and it may not be exactly that way. Secondly, we know that there are extremists in each of our community, in every religious community. Extremist Buddhists in Myanmar, here, extremist Hindus in India, extremist Christian militias in Central Africa Republic, extremist Jews on some elements of the West Bank in who are willing to use violence against civilians, and extremist groups in a range of Muslim communities. Some of those elements sink into the conversations that we have, and we trying to figure out how to address it and how to deal with it is often difficult. You want to respect people who have different views than yours within our own faith communities, but at times you have to say, wait a minute, you should know that that's not how the majority of folks in our community feel as what you just heard here. And that creates some interesting tensions. It's just a reality of the work that we do, that you run into that. It's less tensions amongst us than it is how we deal with tension and how effectively we see each other dealing with tensions as they arrive in some of the dialogues that we have facilitated around the world.
Yeah, one of the difficult things that David took me to a long walk in Russia. I don't know what he was taking me in the forest. And Bob always joke about, about my faith and kind of things in not an offensive way. But I'm the among the two, I'm the immigrant, Black, and Muslim. Yeah, but we have a tremendous harmony, I would say. But when it comes to real work, I do agree with Bob. Bob will have deadline to push things and so forth, and David will read every sentence, make sure that is accurate, it's correct, and so forth. But that's the beauty of working together, and I think that the diversity within this group is what enrich our friendship. I learned a lot walking hours with David, with Bob. We learn about one another. We talk about our family, about who we are. It's not only about strategy and theology and so forth, but there's a human aspect of this relationship, which is very important to me.
But Magid said something very important, Kevin. And here's the reality. We watch imams and pastors and rabbis change their mind all the time. It's not because we have new information they've not heard. It's because they build a relationship. And that's everything. I'm not going to mention the country, but we were in a country not long ago doing one of these retreats. And at the one evening, a bunch of the imams wanted to take the pastors out because they were seeing how Magid and I were laughing. And the pastors were asking me, how can you be friends with an imam like that? The imams were asking Magid the same thing. Well, many of these pastors had been trying to build churches and the local government wouldn't let them. But it was the imams that was pushing the local government not to let them. The next morning, the imams apologized to the pastors and said, look, we misunderstood who you were. You're going to get to build your church.
It was an extraordinary moment. It really was memorable for us.
And we see that.
Well, this has been terrific. I really hate to cut us off, but it is 9 p.m. and I've got 4 little kids in quarantine, so I don't want to put any more of the burden on my wonderful wife. But I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. I do want to, again, plug our dialogue next week with Omar Suleiman of the Yakin Institute, as well as Scott Saul, Senior Pastor of Christ Presbyterian Church in Nashville. Head over to our Facebook and Twitter pages. In just a minute, we'll have a registration link up to join us for next Wednesday's dialogue. If you have any thoughts or feedback about tonight's dialogue, we'd love to hear from you on our website, neighborlyfaith.org. There's a tab that says join us, and you can write us a message in the contact form. In fact, just during the call, I've gotten a few of those. And so until next time, again, my name is Kevin Singer, co-director and co-founder of Neighborly Faith. Visit our website, neighborlyfaith.org, for more information. Also, check out Multi-Faith Neighbors Network. They'll have some great events coming up soon. Follow Bob, Imam Magid, and Rabbi David also. They are all on Twitter, I know. So go ahead and follow them, and they have great tweets out there. And thank you for coming. And I hope everyone is healthy during this season. And again, we're grateful that you joined us tonight. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.